First of all, maybe a quick reminder, why do we even need IPv6? Why is this a topic? For us, various customers have requested it, and they need it pretty soon. So that's a pretty important reason. Second reason is, of course, that the world is moving on, and IPv6 is a thing that we slowly cannot escape, I think. And Cloud Foundry needs to keep up with the time. It's also great to hear the recommitment of Tanzu to the platform. I hope that will inject some manpower into IPv6 as well. And third, because we're technical folks, there's some technical benefits that are pretty cool with IPv6 and that make the setup overall simpler. It looks more complicated now because we are not super familiar with IPv6 yet, but if you look at it, there's just fewer layers, and that's always great. So in this last iteration between the CF Day in Europe and now, we've been working mostly on IPv6 egress. And that means that you push a CF app that can then do calls via IPv6. And that entails a few things that you then need to do. So one of the things that we wanted to do, and one of the simplifications we have in the network layer, is that each of the containers should just have its own IPv6 address, which means there's no overlay network anymore. It simplifies the whole network environment. And you can clearly see where requests are originating from. And that's great for traceability, for analysis, because at SAP, we're treating Cloud Foundry as a multi-tenant platform. We can then also identify bad actors and so on more easily. Instead of just seeing, okay, there's a NAT gateway out of, 3 IP addresses, we can now see who did it. We will be able to. It's not quite there yet. So if you have an IP address per app, what does that mean? Each of the apps runs on a Diego cell eventually, so the Diego cell needs to have an IP address pool from which it can delegate IP addresses. And the more purple it gets, the more variable it gets. The green parts are kind of the individual separate parts. So we break down the IP address range that we get from a hyperscaler that is very, very, very large into smaller pieces. Maybe starting at 0.4, infrastructure provides us a layer. We break it down to subnets in Bosch. One of those subnets can then be delegated to the Diego deployment. Each Diego deployment then gets a smaller subset of that again, and those subsets are dynamic, and eventually we'll end up with an IP address per container. Good. So all of this logic needs to be built because it's at the moment not there yet, and our teams are working really hard. So this is why the progress report, this is now very, very close to actually being done. There's a few things that apply in general. IP addresses should be globally routable. This is just best practice from IPv6 overall in networking. So to avoid private networks and virtualized networks, we just want one IP address range. We don't do any abstractions. Everything is just addressable as is. And we also want that people from the outside of our foundation cannot just talk to individual cells or individual apps. They should go through the routing layer, should go through GoRouter and all of its mappings and checks and whatever else you have, maybe a WAF. So there needs to be protection for that as well. But it's just firewall rules in the end. You don't need anything fancy. You have a firewall rule, and you just allow the communication from the points where you want to. So a few more actual progress things of where we got. Maybe important to say, at the moment, we're aiming at AWS as a first platform for all of this. That's also partially because the first customer that we have is on AWS. We will extend this into other hyperscalers and other environments in the future. It's a fundamental thing in Bosch. So eventually it will come to other CPIs there. Last time I talked about ingress. For us, that topic is mostly solved because CF didn't need to be changed for that. If you assume that CF can remain IPv4 internally and IPv6 all handled at the load balancer level, eventually we'll get there that other stuff will be IPv6 enabled as well. And as I mentioned, we focused on egress now, where we're concluding most of the development. We're going into the testing phase, testing also in the community, but also at SAP, of course. We have an RFC that has been proposed, reviewed, and approved, and the tracking issue is linked here. So if you want to see what we're up to right now, you can click that and have a look. But in short, Bosch is now handing out IPv6 addresses and IPv6 prefixes, which means CIDR ranges for individual VMs, like for Bosch, for Diego, where then Diego can then use those IP address ranges and delegate those to its containers. And we're working on the acceptance tests in the community. There's some environments, but more on that in a bit. Okay, Bosch. This is the general setup of Bosch. Everything that is in bold print with these pull request markers is currently open, but very, very, very close to being complete. But it's all a big tangle of things that all need to happen at the same time. And once they're all done, they work and then they can be merged. Also shout outs in the corners to the people that either have reviewed this or worked on this. So this is my way of saying thank you very much to the overall community, not just our teams. On the Diego side and on the cloud controller side, it's similar. There is some things on the cloud controller side is quite minimal, fortunately. It's just in quote ASGs. Diego is the fundamental big change that you can figure probably if we need to address each container individually. All of that logic that you've just seen, all of these layers that I've just shown, eventually end up in Diego. Work there is ongoing as well. And I think we finally reached an agreement with the community how we can actually get this change in without having it fully tested in the community yet. But we'll get there as well. It's all a process. But the collaboration with the community, again, has been wonderful and responsive. And we're really moving forward. Final thing about the acceptance testing. For the acceptance tests, there is now a new environment called Dobby. And that environment will be set up with an IPv6-enabled bubble environment that will then run specific tests for IPv6 egress scenarios, eventually also ingress scenarios, that we have full coverage there as well. And eventually, Dobby might be retired, and we just switch over the regular AWS environment to also include these IPv6 tests. Bubble. Bubble is a thing that is kind of, for me, was always on the sidelines, but it's a vital thing to actually set up environments for the acceptance tests. It did not support anything about IPv6 at all. It starts to now. We're working very hard on that. And that's also getting pretty close, but it's a prerequisite for actually getting this Dobby environment up and running. But I think in the next weeks, you should probably have a bubble release that can deploy IPv6 dual stack environments. Again, shout out in the corners. Thank you, everybody. Wrapping up. The dual stack egress part, when I say IPv6, I always mean dual stack. We don't get rid of IPv4. We do both at the same time. But it's close to having its first results. We need that pretty soon. And I think in the community, we'll also be able to show something pretty soon. Because also testing iterations are going at full speed. For us, we're working on dev releases and hope that we can work with proper releases soon with experimental features that are not recommended yet for public use, but we can try them out, test drive them, shake out any of the bugs that we still find, and eventually have a release that is nice, solid, and stable. And in the community, it's the acceptance tests and the various component tests that we have and the test environments there that at the moment also don't really support IPv6 yet, but working on that. And for the future, and this is a call to everybody, we'll need pretty much all of the other components also to support IPv6 eventually. There will be plans and discussions about that. So if you want to contribute, please reach out. If you don't want to contribute yet, you might eventually get an issue and we'll help you. Thank you slide is getting bigger and bigger because more and more people are involved. So thank you all for the support from the community, from our teams, from the teams at Broadcom and various other people. Thank you for reviewing the RFC. It's a great exchange. Thank you very much.